The story of Helm Hammerhand appeared in the appendixes of Tolkien's epic story of the Lord of the Rings. It recounted a crucial point in the history of the kingdom of Rohan, in the land of the horses and the warriors in that land. It tells the story of how Helm Hammerhand got into conflict with another group of people and took his people to Helm's Deep and used his raw strength to preserve his people up until his death. And afterwards, the rights to enter Isengard were given to Saruman the Wise. A fairly simple story, and when the time came for an adaptation to be made, filmmakers thought it would be a good idea to adapt it in anime format. Needless to say, fans of Middle-earth and anime were really excited, but the final result left much to be desired. So today, we are going to reconstruct The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. And yes, I did purchase a physical copy on Blu-ray, because if I'm going to watch it again, at least let me see the pretty visuals in HD! So with that said, let's get reconstructing. So, where exactly did this adaptation fall short? Many people complained that there was far too much focus on the character of Hera, who in the source material was the unnamed daughter of Helm Hammerhand. The story was meant to be about Helm Hammerhand, but there was far too much attention on Hera, who was a vastly underdeveloped protagonist. Fans complained that Hera was an underdeveloped protagonist who got far too much screen time compared to Helm Hammerhand, who quite frankly should have had more screen time and more meaningful character development. They presented Hera as yet another typical girl boss, a trait which many people were getting sick and tired of. But thankfully, Hera is a far more endearing protagonist than the stubborn, dislikable Guy Ladriel from Rings of Power.
There's a tempest in me.
So yeah, needless to say, as lackluster as this film is, I would rather watch this movie 30 times over than to ever watch Rings of Power ever again! Besides, it's not as if this film got things completely wrong. The visuals are absolutely gorgeous. But with that said, Hera's main, her main leather outfit seemed unusually skimpy for this kind of time period. There was a fan online who made a more realistic light armored suit for Hera to wear, so we're going to swap her traditional attire with that, because it looks more practical and it looks a lot more gritty. And okay, if Hera just naturally has a big bosom, fine, but you need to work her clothing in a way that makes practical sense, okay? Another major fix we're going to make is her name, because the entire setting of Tolkien's Legendarium is based on Norse Anglo-Saxon legend, and Hera is a Greek name, not a Norse name. So, we're going to rename Hera to Hervor. That is a Norse name that means guardian, and that is far more thematically appropriate for this character, and is a far more worthy name for the daughter of Helm Hammerhand. It makes sense. Helm Hervor. Makes sense? Another major thing to improve upon is that we're going to give Helm Hammerhand more meaningful screen time, and we're going to make him less oafish than he was in the film that we saw. Of course, we need to still keep some elements of his weaknesses in order to have more authentic character growth, kind of similar to what we saw with King Theoden in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So that the end result will be that Helm Hammerhand is a reliable leader, but he has his own flaws to overcome in regards to stubbornness and the like. And meanwhile, we're going to give Hervor a more meaningful character arc as well, where she starts off as fairly stubborn in her own ways, just like her father. But over time, she grows to reject her own ways and more than ever look out for her own people, just like her descendant, just like Éowyn would do in later years. I mean, don't get me wrong, in the film as it is, Hera is still compassionate towards her people and still even caring towards her archenemy in some tragic ways. But with this newly refined, reconstructed character arc, Hervor is going to have to be humble enough to admit that she needs to grow in some ways and be willing to let others do some things for her while she can step in to be responsible for other things. In the film as it was, it's rather unusual for this time period, may I be specific, for someone like Hera to try to put her input with a group of men who have seen war and battle and strategy for much longer periods and much more up close than Hera has in her lifetime. That's not an insult, that's just a fact. Another thing we need to improve with this character narrative is that we need to stop cramming the girl bossness down people's throats. Okay, yes, Rohan has a history of shield maidens. Stop cramming it down our throats. We get it. Women have been mistreated in the past. We get it. There are much more nuanced ways to approach the topic, for crying out loud. To fix this, I think there can be a balance where in the meeting rooms we can have maybe half or less of certain rooms have very mean-spirited things to say about the shield maidens of Rohan, whereas the other half or so of the room actually agrees that we need to bring the shield maidens back into business. Something like that. Just so the whole girl boss thing isn't crammed down audiences' throat to roll their eyes. Another thing we're going to improve on is that we're going to give more character development to Hervor's brothers to make their sacrifices and deaths a lot more tragic. And we're also going to tweak the characterization of the main antagonist of the movie. I will say it's rather interesting to characterize Wolf as a man who fights with one sword and no shield, indicating stubbornness and arrogance, whilst we see Hera fighting with a sword and a shield. So I know people will say that it's unrealistic for someone who's seen a battle up close more often in this time period to get the upper hand over Hera. But at the same time, let's be realistic here. Hera has a tactical advantage over Wolf. She has a shield, Wolf doesn't. So that's what gives Hera the edge over Wolf, because he's arrogant and stubborn, which is a common theme amongst villains in Middle-earth history, as well as evil in general, really. So, by all means, we're going to keep the same strategy games that occurred as depicted in the movie, but we're going to tweak Wolf's narrative so that he comes across a bit less incompetent. Obviously, for the sake of making him a villain, we still want to make him incompetent in the sense that he's prideful and that he does take the bait of that trap that Hervor sets up. We're going to tweak the ending so that it remains true to the book and that Helm Hammerhand can have his victory over Wolf. And we're going to fix the ending so that the person who actually killed Wolf gets the chance in the spotlight. But I think it would be a good idea to have Hervor fight against Wolf, psychologically manipulating him via wearing that old wedding dress. And then by the time Wolf ends up humiliating himself, he ends up in a situation where he fights off the character who actually kills him in the source material. That way, you can have Hervor have her moment of empowerment while still keeping true to the source material in a way that's not going to tick off the fans. Another thing that's probably warranting fixing are some of the action scenes, like take, for example, Hera's escape from Isengard. She escapes via a horse which is being rode on alongside an older woman who used to be a shield maiden of Rohan. The bad guys don't chase them, even though, objectively speaking, two people on one horse would make for a slower ride, we're not talking about a woman and a hobbit. We're talking about two fully sized women riding a horse. So that would slow the horse down, whereas other horses with one person to carry would be able to catch up. So we're going to tweak the action scene so that that elder shield maiden of Rohan actually brings another horse with her. That way, Hervor can jump onto the horse without the rider, and then they both ride on their own respective horses away. That gives more credibility to why Wolf doesn't bother chasing them. Obviously, now I can understand that you'd want to have Helm Hammerhand keep making mistakes for the sake of authentic characterization, but we're going to tweak the narrative so that Helm Hammerhand does have some genuinely good ideas, which gives the people a valid reason to keep following him as a leader. Also, whilst it's in my head, you should probably remove the arbitrary reference of Gandalf by the end of the movie. Or make it more earned, because Hervor did encounter orcs who were looking for rings, and I understand that would get Gandalf's attention. But if Hervor is going to get an invitation from Gandalf of all people to that capacity, that needs to be more earned. So give more subtle hints throughout this reconstructive narrative. And those are all the major tweaks I would give to The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim animated movie. What do you think could have been improved on with this movie that I didn't mention? Let me know in the comments down below, and I look forward to a conversation in the comments. What do you think of this video, and what do you think of this video series? Give a like and thumbs up and share with people for all kinds of good stuff. And thank you all so much for watching. In the meantime, ScotsThinker signing out.